Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back with another video, but before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. So we're back with another video. Today is April 4th, 2022. For many people, why are you starting off by mentioning today's date? Well, today is the 54th anniversary, unfortunate anniversary, of the assassination of the late, great Rev Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so I think it's very important that many people know that I am a Pan-Africanist, I'm unapologetically African. And many people argue, well, why are you giving praise to Dr. King? Dr. King was not a Pan-Africanist, I've always stated. Ideologically, he was on the other side of the street. He was an integrationist. But I respect his grind, his passion, his commitment, his gravitas, and his commitment, lifelong commitment to liberation of African people, and most importantly, his willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice. We know historically, and even today, in many conscious circles or woke communities, many people tend to speak ill of other Black activists that weren't what Pan-Africanists or Black nationalists. We know we've seen this when people would speak ill of A. Philip Randolph, so on and so forth. And I think that's rather problematic, right? I think that we can understand that even though they didn't share the same ideological frame of reference, they did want what? Liberation for African people in whatever way they believe that could come to fruition. I also think it's very important that we understand that there are oftentimes many misnomers about Dr. King, his life, and his legacy. Yes, we know that, Ralph Abernathy, in his autobiography, he talks about the infidelity of Dr. King and how he cheated on Coretta Scott. And that's unfortunate. We don't want to sweep that on the rug. I don't think that anyone should be married to anyone and then committing adultery or being unfaithful for a number of different reasons. And we could talk about that in another video. But I do think it's important to understand Dr. King's position on nonviolence. So I always tell people, if you get a chance, read Dr. King's autobiography. I have it here. I've read it about 3 or 4 times. And one of the things he talks about, he's at home, he's having a conversation with Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, in his home at the dining room table. And Kwame Ture says, listen, brother, one of the issues with the nonviolent civil rights movement is that we're too nonviolent, that these white vigilantes are using this as an excuse to jump on us and hit us upside the head, and we have to fight back. And Dr. King said, listen, nonviolence is simply a political strategy when we're protesting. Excuse me. He says, this is not a question of if you should pick up a firearm and defend your family if someone breaks into your home. So Dr. King was not a pacifist, right? He simply believed in nonviolence as a method and means of political agitation, right? Secondly, I think it's very important, and especially if you talk to young children, where they have so-called Black History Month celebrations. Of course, we know it's Pan-African History Month, and we know we can't have any mention of Pan-African History Month unless we honor and recognize the man who created Black History Week, which became Pan-African History Month, and that is, of course, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who created the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, also known as ASALH. But with that being said, I think it's important that we understand with Dr. King that he mentions in his autobiography that love without power is sentimental and anemic, right? So oftentimes, unfortunately, when our children are going to school and they learn about Dr. King and Rosa Parks, Dr. King loved everyone. Dr. King was much more than someone who simply believed in love would solve a problem. As I stated, he states that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Another thing, many people don't know that in 1967, Dr. King wrote a position paper on Black Power. Some people argue that he was in support of Black Power. Some people argue that he was against Black Power. Some people argue that he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, in which he was trying to appease the radicals, and of course the whites who were the philanthropists who were supporting and funding the civil rights movement. However, what we do know is there were a number of things that he stated that are very radical, right? He stated that we, like the people of Rhodesia and Zimbabwe and South Africa, suffer from domestic colonialism. Many people do not know that in March of 1957, when Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence from colonialism, he and his acolytes were present at the Independence Day celebration at Liberation Square, I believe that is the name, in Accra. So many people don't know that Dr. King did have a Pan-Africanist view, as did Booker T. Washington, where we'll do a video on him when the time is appropriate. But I think there are 4 things that we need to take away. when we mention Dr. King, the 54th anniversary, unfortunate anniversary of his untimely assassination. Number one, he advocated, he got to the point, he became focused in human rights. Like Malcolm X, he understood that this was a human rights issue, that our rights as human beings were being violated. Number two, he gave an example of how he was able to overcome petty ideological differences to work for the greater good of who we are as a people. This was the second time that this happened in African American history, in which a black nationalist and a integrationists worked together. The first time, of course, was in the 19th century between Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany. And then, of course, in the 20th century, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King decided that they could work together, they could coalesce their efforts for the greater benefit of the African American community. Number three, we have to understand that he made a lifelong commitment to what? The restoration of African people to our traditional greatness. And then number four, and this is probably the most important, he made the ultimate sacrifice, and that was to give his life, to become a martyr for the cause of African redemption at home and abroad. If you don't believe me, and when I say that he believed in African redemption, then you should maybe do some research on the things he had to say about Marcus Garvey. Many people don't know that when Dr. King wrote this book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, which I've read, and I would implore everyone to read this book if you get a chance. He mentioned when he went to Jamaica and he was renting a small cottage, he visited Marcus Garvey's gravesite, and he talked about that he was the first black man that he could recall that taught us to have pride in who we were as a people, to teach us that we were more than simply being Negroes, right? We were more than simply being ex-slaves, that we were black people, we were African, and we had a history and a heritage and a culture that we should be proud of. So once again, just want to take some time to honor Dr. King of the 54th anniversary of his unfortunate and untimely assassination. Just wanted to make sure that even though we were ideologically on the other side of the other street, that I respect what he did for us as a people. I know many people unfortunately speak ill of Dr. King, but I know the truth about what he was fighting for, what he was advocating for, and that even though I may not agree with his methods in every way, shape, or form, I do know that he was sincere. And I know Malcolm X always stated that, listen, I may do some things wrong, but I am sincere and it comes from the heart. So, I believe the same thing to be the case with Dr. King, that if he did anything that was not in our best interest, we could charge it to his head and not to his heart, because his heart was in the right place. So that's all I have for now. Until next time, you know what to do. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Peace.